Now to we'll deal with Bodin, another very important person, a scholar of philosopher of 16th century. He was born in 1529 and died in 1596. Now, this with him in the first half of the 16th century France, modern historiography was considerably forwarded. Now we are moving away from the geographical boundary of Italy towards France. So this is how this will also indicate the diffusion of ideas and modern historiography, modern methods of historiography. Like Ibn Khaldun, what we find is that it is suspected by some modern historians that he had access to Latin translation of Khaldun's works. He insists on a broader perspective of history like Khaldun rather than a mere chronological narration of political events. He goes beyond that. His well-known text is Six Livres de la République, published in 1576, and it has been translated as like the Six Bouquets of Commonweal. Which translation was, you see how quick the translation also came in 1606. That shows how important he was. To a great part, he is devoted to historical method rather than to historical narrative. Thus, already by the 16th century, there is a larger conception of history at work. Then comes Francis Bacon. He was born in 1561 and died in 1626, and with him we are graduating into the next century, 17th century. Bacon was a statesman. He was a multi-dimensional personality. He was a statesman, a lawyer, an essayist, and a philosopher. He had a spectacular career between his admission to Cambridge University at the age of 12, I emphasize at the age of 12, and his fall from high office probably as a result of political machinations at the age of 60 in 1621. Despite being a busy and ambitious man, he managed to devote time to his great love, that is, study of philosophy and science. In fact, he may be considered as the first person who will be invoking scientific principles in historical methodology. But with the leisure infused by his fall, he set himself to finish an encyclopedic work encapsulating everything known, together with his theories about how more knowledge can be acquired or how much knowledge can be acquired. It was called the Instauratio Magna, implying a great beginning for a new age of firmly based knowledge. He died before he could finish the project, but one of his influential legacies was a book called The New Atlantis, published posthumously in 1627. He died in 1626. It is set out his concept of a Solomon's house. This is well known by this name. A research institute for collaborative scientific effort, and the idea that directly inspired the founders, as they themselves acknowledged, the Royal Society in London in 1662. Bacon's commitment to promotion of serious science had the practical aim of improving humanity's lot through increased understanding and control of nature. Both the points are very important. Understanding and control of nature. So, he is thinking in terms of dealing with nature directly. Contrary to the usual view that he was merely a theoretician of method rather than a practicing scientist, he did indeed engage in hands-on science, constructing a physical system and attempting experiments. This is the hallmark of his research. It was the result of an experiment on refrigeration, suffering a dead chicken with snow to see how long it would last, that he caught a chill and ultimately suffered. Because of that, he died. His system of physics, geocentric and still owing too much to Aristotle, despite his rejection of scholasticism, did not advance matters. He did, however, make two major contributions. For him, these two contributions, and these are the foundational, principal contributions by him. One was his advocacy of cooperation in science. That is not a single individual's effort, as therefore requiring an institutional basis for shared experimentation and the exchange of ideas. The magicians and occultists of his day were secretive, keeping their knowledge to themselves because they did not want others to steal a march on them. Bacon saw that progress requires a collegial endeavor, collective endeavor, and he advocated it strongly. Science has proved him right. If you go by the, Nobel Prize for different branches of science, you will find always collaborative efforts, various scientists practice, doing experiments in different parts of the globe, getting recognition. That is, there lies the Bacon's contribution. His second contribution lay in the idea of scientific method itself. He is talking in terms of scientific method. He had sketched these ideas in an earlier work, The Advancement of Learning of 1605, and developed then in work for the Instauratio Magna, one part of which, Novum Organum Scientiarum, had been published in 1620 and was of particular significance and particular relevance for us. Why? Because as an empiricist, he was very particular about the data. Bacon argued that science must be based on observation of facts. History also do that, which underpin the theories that organize and explain them. This view is often caricatured as saying that inquiries should gather observations at random and then find a theory to explain them. But that is not what Bacon meant. The caricature was nevertheless widely believed. Even Newton and Darwin subscribed to it, and indeed both approved of it. In the second edition of Principia, Newton wrote, "Hypotheses have no place in experimental philosophy. In this philosophy, particular propositions are inferred from the phenomena and afterwards rendered a general, by induction." Likewise, Darwin in his autobiography wrote, "It appeared to me that by collecting all facts which bore in any way on the variation of animals and plants under domestication and nature, some light might be thrown on the whole subject. My first notebook was opened in July 1837. Darwin is saying this. I worked on true Baconian principles and without any theory collected facts on a wholesale scale." Now, this was not what Bacon had supposed to be. The first skeptical consideration Descartes, uses is a reminder that our senses sometimes lead us astray. Perceptual misjudgments because of that. Illusions, hallucinations can and not infrequently do give us false beliefs. This might prompt us at the very least to be cautious in placing confidence on sense experience as a source of truth. Experience as a source of truth. But even so, there would be many things, he says, that I believe on the basis of my current experience, such as that he says that I have hands and I am holding a book in them, that I am sitting in an armchair and the like. To doubt this would seem to be madness, even given the senses' frequent unreliability. So, he is saying that you can't base your things on senses. Like Machiavelli, he was retired from public life, as I told you, because of political machinations, in turn forced him to take refuge in writing. Machiavelli, we had discussed, he also was, when he was ousted from the power, he also did that in his later years. He extended the meaning of humanism. further by arguing that principle of induction. Now he is invoking a new principle. Principle of induction used in science should also be applied to the study of man, and history is a study of man, so it should be find a place in history also. That is to say, one starts by rejecting all presumed laws. That is induction, you reject all presumed laws. There are no assumptions. Then you proceed to infer laws by first assembling a large number of facts on a stated subject, on a one project, and then classifying them in an effort to seek their causal relationships. Only then you can induce a result from that, not begin by that. One might agree or disagree with his principle of induction, but none can deny him credit of giving big push forward to the study of history by raising the question of doubt. This is another important contribution, question of doubt. That is, all statements are to be rejected unless proved true. So nothing is true in itself. Descartes, following him, he was born in 1596 and died in 1650, hardly 54 years. But he is, like Bacon, he is also advocating certain things which are of immense value for history writing. He is the other great advocate of method. He was a contemporary of Bacon. In applying his method to what he saw as fundamental problems, Descartes raised questions that shaped much philosophical debate in centuries that followed. Questions about skepticism, uncertainty, the nature of mind and its relation to matter, and the role of reason in that. In recognition of these achievements and their influence, historians of philosophy have labeled him as the father of modern philosophy. Descartes was born at La Haye. They have since renamed Descartes in his honor. Now this place is called Descartes, in Touraine, in France. He was trained as a lawyer first, then went to the Netherlands to join the Dutch army in order to study military engineering. Incidentally, I also got some training in Holland. This fostered his interest in mathematics, to which he made important contributions, unforgettable contributions. His chief interest was physics. He wished to replace the Aristotelian view of the universe taught by church, to which he otherwise remained loyal throughout his life. To church he remained loyal, but he questioned the methodology with his own. To prepare the ground for his science, he felt that he needed to settle the question of how we can acquire knowledge. Bacon was concerned with how much knowledge one can acquire. So, how we can acquire knowledge and attain the truth. His book on this topic, that is Meditations on First Philosophy, is the classic text that earned him the father of modern philosophy title. There are two parts to Descartes' view. One is that inquiry should consist in small, cautious steps from one clear idea to the next, each step carefully reviewed until the chain of reasoning is complete. The other consists in ensuring that the starting point of chain is unquestionably certain. First, be very rigorous on that. To achieve this certainty, Descartes famously employed a method of doubt. This is another major contribution. The principle of his method is never to accept anything for true which I did not clearly know to be such, and to compromise nothing more in my judgment than what was presented to my mind so clearly and distinctly as to exclude all ground of doubt. So, when you are free from all doubts, only then you should feel that this is the truth. He applied this method to a related set of our basic questions. For example, the first question is, what can I know with certainty? Remember the premise which he is prescribing. Then next two are, what is the constitution of the universe? And what are the relationships between its fundamental constituents? What constitutes that? The last question concerns the existence of a good God, because Descartes needed the concept of such a thing to help with the answer to first question. As often happens in philosophy, the answer to the first question determines the answers to the others. First, you will have to settle the first question. So, the method of doubt proceeds as follows. If he is saying this, not me, even if I doubt everything, I normally take myself to know or believe. I cannot doubt that I exist. This is the starting point of certainty, that I exist. This argument, seemingly so simple and direct, is Descartes' celebrated cogito ergo sum. That is, I think, therefore I am. It's a very famous quotation. I think, therefore I am. Not because you are there, that is why you think. No. I think, therefore I am. So, he is giving precedence to thinking, to cognition. He then immediately asks, what is this thing that I know with certainty exists, this me or I? He replies that a little reflection shows that I am a mind or thinking thing, even if I, within quote, do not have a body, because it is possible to doubt that one has a body. But how can one get from knowledge, however certain, that I exist as a thinking thing, to there being anything other than me, most importantly, an external world and other selves? So, Descartes needs something to carry certainty beyond the starting point of the cogito. He was saying cogito ergo sum. So, he finds it in the idea that there is a good God. The qualification good is important. He is qualifying that, because a good God would not wish us to be deceived if we correctly use the faculties he has given us. A bad deity would doubtless take pleasure in deceiving us, not a good deity, good God. Descartes accordingly offers proofs of the existence of such a deity, and correlatively argues that the errors we are prone to fall into are to be blamed not on the deity but on our own post-Adam fallen natures. Although he was a strong critic of Bacon, he agreed with Bacon also at some point when he says that the veracity of all laws has to be doubted unless proved true, with which I had ended, when I was discussing Bacon. But then he argued that once you arrived at a particular law by the process of induction, by collecting all data and everything, then you can apply it to other situations on the basis of deduction. So, two methods are important, and at the basis, the theory of doubt, induction and deduction, and they serve as the basis of modern scientific principles. Being a mathematician, rather a geometrician, Descartes believed in having an assumption or hypothesis first, then to test its veracity by twin process of induction and deduction, as I was telling you. Thus, under the influence of the spirit of humanism and revival of Greco-Roman learning, begins the evolution of modern historiography. The initial endeavors were no more than retrieval and translation of Greek historical works, but they soon paved the way for increasing dissociation of religion from the assessment of culture, and a realization of history being a larger discipline than mere ecclesiastical history, the history of the church. A natural corollary of this perhaps was the replacement of Christendom with a nation as being the major framework of history. So, instead of church-centric, it became nation-centric. Perhaps more significant was the realization that while Greek learning was very useful and important, it was not sacrosanct, but has enough scope for further improvement and advancement. This recognition led to the formulation of principles to test the authenticity of not only scientific but also historical facts. So, Bacon therefore developed the method of induction. formulation of general laws only from observed phenomena, thereby cautioning neutrality in situations where these phenomena are not observed. In other words, one should go to the phenomena without any prior conception or framework, classify these phenomena and deduce laws out of them. In physical science, these would be laws of nature. In social sciences, these are laws of society, which Bacon did not consider very different from laws of nature of science. As an advancement on Bacon, Descartes developed the method of deduction, whereby, as in geometry, you start with assumptions or axioms to reach the theorems. In other words, if you could formulate general laws on the basis of induction, these could, on the basis of deduction, be applied to other situations with similar circumstances. Thus, if cause-effect relationship in one case is known, in a different case wherein causes are similar, consequences can be known and vice versa. It can't be different. Note that Descartes' method of doubt turns crucially on setting aside any belief or claim of knowledge or claim to knowledge which admits of the least doubt, however improbable or absurd that doubt might seem to be. The aim is to see what, if anything, is left behind once one has called into question everything it is possible to question. Everything has to be questioned. Whatever is left will be absolutely certain. It would take impossibly long to subject each individual belief to scrutiny one by one, so Descartes needed a wholly general method of setting aside what can be doubted. This he did by employing the arguments of the skeptic. His use of skeptical arguments, that is doubting everything, does not make him a skeptic, in the real sense. On the contrary, he used the arguments merely as heuristics, as aids in setting up his theory of knowledge. He therefore merits the label methodological skeptic rather than problematic skeptic. He is not problematic, by which latter term is meant anyone who thinks that skepticism poses a real threat to the acquisition of knowledge. Most philosophers since Descartes' time have felt that he did not provide an adequate answer to the skeptical doubts he raised, and that therefore skepticism really is a problem. The first skeptical consideration Descartes uses is a reminder that our senses sometimes lead us astray. Normally happens. Perceptual misjudgments could be there. Illusions, hallucinations can and not infrequently do give us false beliefs. This might prompt us at the very least to be cautious in placing confidence on sense experience as a source of truth. That should also be taken with a pinch of salt. But even so, there would be many things, he argues, that he says that I believe on the basis of my current experience, such as that I have hands and am holding a book in them, and that I am sitting in an armchair and the like. To doubt this would seem to be madness, even given the senses' frequent unreliability. He is not relying on that. Would it really be mad to doubt such things? Descartes says no, very emphatic no. Here he brings his second argument into play. He argues, I quote for him, "For I sometimes dream when I sleep, and if I am now dreaming that I am sitting in an armchair holding a book, my belief that I am so doing is false. To be certain that I am sitting thus, I have to be able to exclude the possibility that I am only dreaming that I am doing so. How is that to be done? It seems impossible to do it." These are the three basic principles which he has given, and which the historians are, taking note of, and they are applying. So, in other words, you can say these are applicable suggestions or theories of Descartes for the historians. For every discipline which believes in even an elementary level of science. Next is Voltaire, and with Voltaire we will be graduating from 17th century to 18th century, the age of enlightenment. He will be initiating that. He was born in 1694 and died in 1778, 84 years of age. Voltaire as a historian is often shallow, and his writings had very important effect on history writing. Before coming to the philosophy of Voltaire, it is necessary to state the state of historiography before he came onto the scene. This is important not only in arriving at an estimate of his contribution, but also reflecting on the backdrop to the philosophy. Till the 17th century, the scope of history in Western Europe was restricted to the history of Greece, Rome, and contemporary times. This state of things began to change in the 17th century, particularly in France, when philosophers like Gassendi began to talk about comparative cultures and began to generate an interest among historians about the social and political structure of areas outside Europe. This is the man to whom Bernier was writing letters. If you read the Bernier's account, it is published, you will find he is frequently mentioning him. So, studies of alien cultures and civilization, he is actually laying the foundation of comparative studies. Studies of alien cultures and civilizations began, and with them an assumption gained ground in Europe that all men are equal, all circumstances are different, only circumstances are different. Francois Bernier's letter, he visited India during 1656 to 1667, are very important contribution in this respect. About the same time, another French, Jean Chardin, he wrote a detailed account of Iran, providing details about its geography, culture, and administration with illustrations and drawings. It has rightly been said that one knows more about Iran during those days than one even knows about important places in Europe. A similar task was performed by the Jesuits for China, when in 1710 they mapped the whole of China, cartographic mapping, whole of China. Their detailed reports about China show an enormous appreciation of the Chinese system of administration. Most notable in this respect was the work of Gibbon, whose account of the rise of Islam, Mongols, Ghaznavids, etc., are surprisingly accurate. Thus, as the 18th century opened, the Euro-centered view of history of the Renaissance period began to be altered by what was in a sense universal or world view. It is this perspective that Voltaire's contributions need to be assessed. So, skepticism perhaps is his hallmark, I would say benchmark of his philosophy, though it needs to be emphasized that here, that often he is grossly unfair to his predecessors. Another major contribution, though not explicitly stated, is a view of history as continuously progressing. He therefore rejects both the glorification of the Greco-Roman civilization as well as the characterization of medieval Europe as a period of dark ages. He doesn't agree with both the classifications. He held that feudal Europe had definite contributions to make, and that in any case it marked an advancement over the earlier social formation, that is slave mode of production. History to him is a lot more than just political annals. His reign of Louis XIV is by no means a history of Louis XIV and his court. It includes in his subject matter the economic scene of the period, for example, like agriculture, industry, towns, etc., the cultural life, arts, literature, etc. One major failure, perhaps, with his writings is the absence of a large ideological framework by which he could interrelate these various aspects he sees as a part of history. Details on economy, culture, literature, etc., they appear loose, unrelated and in need of integration. So, this basic shortcoming in his work largely goes unnoticed by his inimitable style of writing, wits, large condemnations and provocative digressions, things like that. Nevertheless, he exercised a considerable amount of influence in his time. Especially noteworthy were his following contributions. Three major contributions: a spirit of skepticism, treatment of history as continuously evolving, the scientific approach. Nevertheless, he exercised a considerable amount of influence in his times, especially noteworthy were his following contributions, three major contributions: a spirit of skepticism, it still continues; treatment of history as a continuously evolving thing, it still continues; and scientific approach is a must.